Today, I want to talk about Ripple and Stellar and probably talk a little bit more about the ILP and XRP because of the Bank of America patent that has been going around for probably longer than I have been in crypto. Ripple was really concentrating on partnerships with institutions, and a lot of people don't like it when I state this, but there's not really any tangible evidence of that. However, there is one particular financial institution that has some ties into XRP as well as XLM, and that is Santander, which I know I'm not pronouncing it right. It is a Spanish bank, but that's just how I'm going to say it. With the recent US changes towards a environment of regulatory clarity, there could and probably should be a lot of positive impacts specifically towards XRP. And once that happens, there is some speculation that Bank of America could publicly go all in on the XRPL because they have stated that they are prepared to adopt crypto payments once there are regulations allowing it. Here is a clip, and I'll comment on it after it's done.
Another one you like is Ripple. You said it is the coin to be looking at right now.
Absolutely.
Why?
Okay, so Ripple actually was the second largest coin prior to the SEC's investigation of them. They did this really weird lawsuit against them. And basically, the Ripple's going to be the track that everything's going to be running on in the future. So they created their own stable coin right now.
Okay.
And Bank of America, like I said, they were doing 100% of their internal transactions. They've got 83 different patents on it, and there's some incredible stuff that's going to be coming out. So
that clip got a lot of traction on X and pretty much everything else in early 2025. And I didn't really ever pay a lot of attention to it because even the XRP maxis were beginning to say, who is this guy? And he states that there are, I believe, 83 patents related to the XRPL and Bank of America, and that 100% of their internal transactions would run on that. Now, they are a long-time quote-unquote partner, but there's not really a lot of specific evidence. A lot of people point towards this one patent from 2018, and sometime after September of 2019, it has been abandoned. And it picked up a lot of attention because of this figure right here, which seems to refer to Ripple and the ILP and possibly even XRP with that kind of a symbol there. And if we go back to this post here, there's a lot of people who are really calling it out because it's just not confirmed. The patent itself is about establishing a real-time net settlement system on DLT, and it was actually filed in 2017, so I didn't interpret that right. And I did ask it to just kind of run through the important points. I won't really talk about it a whole lot here because there's a lot of examples like this that I have talked about. Probably the most currently relevant one are the patents from the DTCC that call out Ripple and Stellar, but I have more information on that to put out hopefully soon. So I did ask it to compare and contrast how it could match up with the XRPL and Stellar and the ILP, and besides that one example where it seems to point towards the XRPL and the ILP as a potential tie-in, there's just really not anything concrete. One thing that could differentiate here is how it refers to smart contracts. And Stellar has had that for what, a year, almost a year and a half now. And technically, the smart contracting with Ripple is on the Ethereum chain. So it's not a direct XRPL application at this point in time. However, there's still a lot of speculation that really persists around Bank of America in particular and Ripple and XRP. Here is Monica Long, who I believe is the president or the chief something, or I'm not positive anymore. I haven't kept up with it, but here she states a pretty huge implication, if it is actually true, about Bank of America.
It feels like the floodgates are going to open this year, doesn't it? I mean, so within the past week, a couple weeks. So SAB 121 being called back or rolled back. And I mean, within, it felt like minutes, you hear from CEOs like Bank of America saying, we're all in. And, these are institutions that Bank of America was one of our early partners when we were doing kind of like the messaging software only payment solution. So we've worked with these types of banks for a long time. And
So once again, it's not all in on XRP, it's just all in on crypto. And it's really beginning to change over to stablecoins. And just recently, Bank of America's CEO said that they are developing their own stablecoin, which they are, I believe, JP Morgan is, and I believe that Citi is too.
It's pretty clear there's going to be a stable coin, which is going to be a fully dollar-backed, type of thing, which is no different than a money market fund with check access. Is no different than a bank account, really. And so, if they make that legal, we'll go into that business. So you'll have a Bank of America coin and a Bank of America and a U.S. dollar deposit, and we'll be able to move them back and forth because now it hasn't been legal for us to do it, but it's just then like another foreign currency.
So at this point, it really begins to sound like these institutions are going to begin to tokenize deposits, which is what I have been talking about for over a year and a half at this point. With that stated, there are still some really interesting patents that tie back into the ILP and Ripple and the XRPL. And the even more interesting thing is the patents that refer to it. So you've got JPM, IBM, MasterCard, Amazon, and of course, Bank of America. I would argue that JPM, IBM, MasterCard, and Amazon at this point in time have stronger tangible ties into Stellar, but with the history of Stellar and Ripple and the ILP and then Stronghold, there's still a lot of potential for a lot of different kinds of interconnections. Here is the patent itself, which if you're interested in it, it's all here. And this is essentially the EU version of that. It is interesting to note that the EU one says that it is not currently active. So here I want to talk more about some interesting connections into these institutions, specifically Bank of America and Santander. And we will come back to how important IBM actually is.
There's a few other categories of things that I'm interested to hear your views on, among many others, is cross-chain. So do you see a world where there will be multiple chains in the traditional capital markets? There will be a chain for one custodian, another bank counterparty, a chain for a clearing and settlement system, and then all those chains will have to interact with each other in a cross-chain system. They'll have to communicate, they'll have to send events to each other. Do you view that as a big part of the puzzle?
I absolutely do. And I think what's interesting is when we were having this blockchain labs in IBM and we're looking into this, of course, we are serving the world.
Of course, we are serving the world's 90% of world's banks.
And I think last March, I really began to get into the ties and the history in between IBM and Stellar in particular. There is one clip of Jed stating how Stellar didn't approach IBM to create WorldWire and then get involved in Hyperledger and stuff like that. Stellar was actually approached by IBM. And especially when we're using MasterCard as an example, they have been heavily involved with Stellar for probably the last 12 months almost at this point, creating their own payment network. And just over the last few weeks, I have found more that further connects JPM and Stellar. So yes, all of these Web 2 payment processors and institutions, a lot of them aren't putting all of their eggs in one basket at this point, especially when it comes to XLM and XRP. Wherever you see one, there's probably a tie into the other one, as we can begin to see here. So this is in between Santander, Bank of America, and Ripple. And Santander has established a protocol with the Bank of America, which promises delivery to any bank in the US. So that would really make it sound as if the Bank of America patent and the very long history there, and in all honesty, a bunch of the hype around it would have a lot of traction to point towards the XRP. But if you look into Santander and Stellar, there's a lot of history, and I have a lot more information on this, specifically with ties into Spain. However, when you begin to peel things away and you begin to look more at the multi-chain approach, Santander has invested in Elliptic, which as of 2020 partnered with Stellar, and then immediately after that worked with the Internal Revenue Service here in the US to use blockchain analytics to go after people for tax avoidance. And in the last couple of months, they have also come out expressing a lot of interest in stablecoins. And they would join Societe Generale, which is a French one, which I can't pronounce at all, Deutsche Bank, who has a lot of ties into Stronghold and Stellar, as well as Standard Chartered, which I have talked about a lot, and they have a lot of ties into Stellar too. Because I'm talking about Stellar ties, I also have to talk about how Santander and Hondo are referencing each other, because the chief marketing officer, VP of whatever it is, came from Stellar. And then we once again have Santander, Deutsche Bank, and Taurus, who is providing custody and tokenization on Stellar. So, in short, I think my big point here is that, especially when it comes to XRP and XLM, if you're saying one institution will go all in, then there's probably ties into the other. And I do look into Stellar more just because it is less popular, and I just decided to talk about it more at the start because it was more of a niche. I do come across a lot more Stellar connections and ties than a lot of typical Crypto X people do. With that said, there seem to be more tangible, provable, institutional adoption examples with XLM and Stellar.